The moment the words left my mouth, "Guys, I have a husband," the entire construction site seemed to hold its breath under the bright Chicago sun. Emiliano Vargas, the no-nonsense manager who'd built a reputation for getting the job done no matter what, stood there in my hard hat and steel-toed boots, waiting for the world to crash down around me. But instead of the jeers or the awkward silence I had feared for years, a few of the guys exchanged glances, and then one of the older workers, Mike, stepped forward with a nod that said more than words ever could. It was the beginning of something I never expected, a journey that would force me to confront every hidden part of myself and the life I'd built with Elias. 2 weeks earlier, Elias and I had sat at our small kitchen table in our downtown apartment, the morning light filtering through the blinds. He looked at me with those warm brown eyes that always made my chest tighten and said quietly, "Em, you can't keep hiding us forever. The crew respects you. It's time." His hand rested on mine, steady and sure, the same hand that had held me through late nights when deadlines crushed me, and the same hand that slipped a simple silver band on my finger 3 years ago in a quiet city hall ceremony with only our closest friends as witnesses. We had met at a charity event for affordable housing projects, ironic since I spent my days building those very structures. Elias was a graphic designer, soft-spoken yet fiercely creative, and from the first conversation by the lakefront we both knew this was different. He understood my world of blueprints and safety protocols, and I fell for his way of seeing beauty in the ordinary. But coming out at work that was a battlefield I wasn't sure I could survive. My father, a retired ironworker, had drilled into me since I was a kid that men don't show weakness. Being gay in his eyes was the ultimate weakness, so I hadn't spoken to him in years. My mother knew and accepted Elias with quiet grace, but the family rift ran deep. At the site, I was the straight-laced boss, never mentioning anything beyond family stuff when asked. The construction industry, even in 2024 America, wasn't exactly a welcoming place for someone like me. I had seen guys get sidelined for less. The fear of losing the respect I had earned through 12-hour shifts and tough calls kept me silent. Yet Elias's gentle push, combined with my own exhaustion from the constant lies, finally broke something inside me. That morning during the daily safety meeting with the crew of 20 men gathered around the trailer, I decided it was now or never. I cleared my throat, my voice steadier than I felt. "Listen up before we start the pour. There's something I need to say. I've been with my husband Elias for 5 years. We're married. I've kept it quiet because I didn't know how you'd take it, but I'm done hiding." The words hung in the air, heavy and real. A couple of the younger guys blinked in surprise. Tommy, the new apprentice, shifted his weight. Mike, the veteran foreman who had worked with me on 3 major projects, just crossed his arms and gave that small nod again. No one laughed. No one walked away. But the silence stretched, and in that stretch I felt my heart hammering against my ribs. What happened next wasn't the explosion I had dreaded, it was the slow crack of something opening inside me. One by one they started nodding, some clapped my shoulder, others simply said, "Cool boss, we got you." It should have been a relief, but instead tears burned at the back of my eyes because for the first time in my adult life I wasn't performing, I was just me. The rest of the day passed in a blur of concrete trucks and rebar checks, but my mind kept replaying the moment. Elias texted me at lunch, "How did it go?" And I replied with a single emoji, the heart one, because I couldn't find the words yet. By the time the sun dipped low over the skyline, painting the girders gold, I realized this confession was only the first step. The crew's reaction had cracked the door, but the real journey, the misunderstandings, the family storms, the moments of doubt, and the unexpected alliances were just beginning. I drove home that evening with the windows down, the cool wind whipping through my hair, and for the first time in years I didn't feel the weight of the secret pressing on my chest. Little did I know the weeks ahead would test every relationship I had with Elias, with my team, and with the man I had been pretending to be for so long. Back at the apartment, Elias met me at the door, his arms wrapping around me without a word. We stood there in the hallway, the city noise faint outside, and I let myself feel the full force of what I had done. "They didn't run," I whispered into his shoulder. He pulled back just enough to look at me, his eyes shining. "Of course they didn't. You're worth knowing the real you." That night we talked until the early hours about the future, the possibilities, and the fears that still lingered. I told him about Mike's nod and the way Tommy had smiled like it was no big deal. Elias listened the way he always did, making me feel seen in a world that had taught me to hide. But even as hope bloomed, a small voice in the back of my mind whispered that not everyone would react the same. The next morning I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing with a group text from the crew. It was a simple message from Mike: "Coffee on me tomorrow, boss. We're family." In that moment, choking back the tears, I realized the reaction I had feared for years had instead given me something I never knew I needed: acceptance. Yet the road ahead was far from smooth, and the real tests of love, friendship, and identity were only just beginning to unfold under the relentless Chicago sky. The days that followed my confession blurred into a new rhythm on the site. The crew treated me the same tough handshakes, same ribbing about bad coffee, but there was an undercurrent of respect I hadn't felt before. Mike started asking about Elias casually. "How's the husband holding up with your crazy hours?" And the question didn't sting, it warmed something deep inside. Tommy, the apprentice, even showed me a photo of his own sister who had come out last year. Small gestures, but they stacked up like rebar in a foundation, strong and steady. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that the real storm was coming from outside the chain-link fence. Elias and I had built our life carefully, piece by piece, after we met at that charity gala. I remember the night clearly, the room filled with city officials and donors, the air thick with expensive cologne and ambition. I was there representing the firm Elias was designing the event graphics. Our eyes met across the room and something clicked. We talked for hours about his dreams of opening a small studio and my passion for building homes people could actually afford. Our first real date was a picnic by Lake Michigan, the wind off the water carrying his laugh. He told me about growing up in a small Illinois town where being different meant keeping your head down. I told him about my father's disappointment the day I chose college over the family trade. We were both carrying invisible weights, but together they felt lighter. 3 years later, when we stood in front of the judge saying our vows, I thought the hardest part was behind us. I was wrong. The first crack appeared on a Thursday when my mother called. She had heard from a cousin who knew someone on the crew. "Emiliano, why didn't you tell us yourself?" Her voice was gentle, but the hurt underneath cut deep. I explained the fear, the years of silence, and she sighed the way mothers do when they've known all along. "Your father won't like it, but he loves you. Bring Elias to dinner Sunday." The invitation felt like a bridge and a trap at the same time. Elias squeezed my hand when I told him, "We'll face it together." That weekend we drove to the old neighborhood, the streets I had run through as a kid now lined with newer cars and the same faded American flags. My father opened the door, his face a mask of stone. Dinner was quiet at first until he set his fork down and looked straight at Elias. "So you're the one who turned my son." The words landed like a dropped beam. Elias didn't flinch. He simply said, "No, sir. I'm the one who loves him." The tension stretched until my mother broke it with dessert and stories from my childhood. My father didn't speak much, but he didn't throw us out either. On the drive home, Elias rested his head on my shoulder and whispered, "That was a start, Em. A real start." Back at work the following Monday, the atmosphere shifted again. One of the older electricians, a guy named Frank, pulled me aside during lunch. "Look, boss, I got no problem with you, but some of the subs might. You know how it is." His warning was well-meaning, but it planted a seed of doubt. That afternoon, during a concrete pour, a minor delay turned into a shouting match when a subcontractor made a snide comment about the boss's lifestyle. Mike stepped in fast, his voice low and firm. "We don't talk like that on this site. Ever." The sub backed down, but the incident lingered in my mind like dust in the air. That night, Elias and I sat on the balcony overlooking the city lights. I told him about the comment, and he listened without judgment. "You're not just my husband, Em. You're their leader. They're learning because of you." His words steadied me, but the internal storm raged on. I started noticing little changes in myself. The way I no longer glanced over my shoulder when I mentioned Elias in conversations. The way I smiled when the crew teased me about being whipped in the best way. Yet the fear of losing everything I had built still hovered. My promotion to district supervisor was up for review, and I knew the higher-ups valued discretion. One wrong word could derail years of hard work. Elias sensed my distraction, and one evening he suggested we take a weekend trip to the cabin we had rented once before. Just us, no phones, no crew. We drove north through the changing leaves, and for 2 days we hiked, talked, and remembered why we chose each other. On the last night by the fire, he said, "Whatever happens with work or family, I'm here. We're building something stronger than any skyscraper." I believed him then more than ever. But the universe had other plans. The next week at the site, Tommy accidentally let slip in front of a new supplier that I was married to a man. The supplier's face tightened, and later that day I received a polite but firm email from the general contractor. "We need to discuss team dynamics." My stomach dropped. I called Elias on my break, my voice tight. "It's starting." He didn't panic. "Then we face it head-on like always." That conversation reminded me why I had fallen for him. His quiet strength was the anchor I needed when the ground shifted. The meeting with the higher-ups was scheduled for Friday, and as the week dragged on I found myself replaying every choice that had led me here. The confession, the family dinner, the small victories with the crew. Each one had been a step toward the man I wanted to be. Now I had to decide if I was willing to risk it all for that man. The answer came easier than I expected, because for the first time in my life I wasn't choosing between love and work, I was choosing both. Friday arrived with a gray sky that matched my mood. I walked into the downtown office building my hard hat left in the truck, my dress shirt feeling too tight. The district manager, a sharp woman named Carla, sat across from me with the project files spread out. "Emiliano, your numbers are solid, but we've had complaints about team cohesion." She didn't say the word gay, but we both knew. I kept my voice even. "If this is about my personal life, I've never let it affect safety or deadlines." Carla leaned back, studying me. "It's not about you. It's about perception. Some clients are old school." The meeting ended with a warning: no promotion yet, but no demotion either. I drove back to the site feeling the weight of every stereotype I had tried to outrun. The crew sensed the shift immediately. Mike pulled me aside at break. "Boss, whatever they said in that meeting, we've got your back." His loyalty hit hard because Mike had a wife and 3 kids and traditional values, but here he was standing with me. Tommy and a couple of the younger guys nodded in agreement. Frank, however, kept his distance, and I noticed him talking quietly with a group of subs during lunch. The tension simmered until the afternoon when a delivery truck arrived late. Frank lost his temper and muttered loud enough for everyone to hear, "Maybe if the boss spent less time playing house, we'd be on schedule." The words cut deeper than any beam ever could. The crew went silent. I stepped forward, my voice low but clear. "Frank, my marriage has nothing to do with the schedule. If you've got a problem with me, say it to my face." He looked away, mumbling an apology, but the damage was done. That night, I told Elias everything, pacing our living room. He listened, then pulled me into a hug. "You stood up for us. That matters." The next morning, Frank didn't show up. Rumors spread that he had requested a transfer. Part of me felt relief, part of me felt the sting of betrayal from a man I had worked alongside for 2 years. The crew rallied, filling the gap without complaint. Mike organized an extra safety drill, and Tommy stayed late helping me recalculate the poor schedule. Their support was quiet and steady, like the foundations we built every day. Yet the internal voice that had kept me hidden for so long whispered doubts. Was I hurting the team? Was love worth the complications? Elias sensed my spiral and suggested we host a small barbecue at our place on Saturday, just a few guys from the crew. Let them see us as people, not labels. I agreed, nervous but hopeful. Saturday came bright and warm. Mike arrived first with his wife and a cooler of beer. Tommy brought his girlfriend. A couple of others followed. Elias grilled burgers, laughing easily with everyone, and I watched from the sidelines as the barriers I had feared dissolved. Mike's wife chatted with Elias about graphic design, and Tommy asked about our wedding photos. No one stared, no one whispered. By the time the sun set and the last car pulled away, I felt something shift inside me, a quiet acceptance that I hadn't known I needed. Elias and I cleaned up in comfortable silence until he said, "See? They didn't run." I pulled him close, the city lights twinkling below us. No, they didn't. But peace was short-lived. Monday brought news that Frank had filed a formal complaint with HR claiming hostile work environment. The accusation was baseless, but it forced another meeting, this time with lawyers. I sat across from the same table, my hands steady on the surface. Carla looked tired. "We're investigating, but it could drag on." The possibility of losing my job, the one thing I had poured my life into, loomed large. That evening, Elias found me on the balcony staring at nothing. He didn't offer empty words. Instead, he sat beside me and said, "Whatever happens, we have each other. The rest is just concrete." His perspective grounded me, reminding me that the real foundation wasn't the buildings, it was the life we had built together. The investigation dragged for weeks with interviews and paperwork, but the crew never wavered. They showed up every day, did the work, and treated me like the same boss they had always known. Their loyalty became the steel that held me together when the system tried to bend me. In the middle of the chaos, my father called unexpectedly. "Son, heard about the trouble at work. Your mother's worried." His voice was gruff, but there was something new underneath. Concern, maybe. I told him the truth, the complaint, the fear, and he listened without interrupting. At the end he said, "You always were stubborn. If this Elias makes you happy, then fight for it." It wasn't an apology, but it was the closest thing to acceptance I had ever gotten from him. I hung up the phone, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone in the battle. The weeks turned into a test of endurance, but every challenge, every misunderstanding, every moment of doubt was shaping me into a man who no longer hid. The crew's reaction, the family's slow thaw, and Elias's unwavering love were teaching me that strength wasn't about silence, it was about standing tall in the truth. The HR investigation finally closed with no findings against me, but the process had left scars. Frank transferred to another site and the crew breathed easier. I threw myself back into the work, the rhythm of cranes and concrete a familiar comfort. Elias noticed the change in me, the way I came home lighter, the way I talked about the guys with genuine affection. One evening he surprised me with tickets to a baseball game, our first real night out since the confession. We sat in the stands, the crowd roaring around us, and for a few hours I was just a guy cheering with his husband, no titles, no drama. When the home team hit a grand slam, Elias leaned over and kissed my cheek right there in the open. No one stared. No one cared. The small moment felt huge, like the final nail in the coffin of my old fears. Yet life had one more curve to throw. My mother called in tears one afternoon. My father had suffered a mild heart attack. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and worry. He looked smaller in the bed, but his eyes were sharp when I walked in with Elias beside me. "You brought him," he said gruffly. Elias stepped forward without hesitation. "Sir, I'm here because I love your son." My father studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. "Good. Family sticks together." The words were simple, but they cracked open years of silence. Over the next days we visited, often Elias helping my mother with meals, me sitting with my father talking about old job sites and new dreams. The heart attack had scared him into seeing what mattered. He never said the words, "I'm sorry," but he asked Elias about his work and even laughed at one of his jokes. Watching them together, I realized forgiveness wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was a quiet nod across a hospital tray. Back at the site, the project was reaching its peak. The new high-rise was taking shape against the Chicago skyline, and my team was performing better than ever. Mike had become my unofficial second in command, and Tommy was shaping up to be a solid foreman one day. During lunch breaks, the conversations flowed easier now, stories about kids, and weekends mixed with casual mentions of Elias's latest design project. The acceptance wasn't perfect, but it was real, and it made the long hours feel lighter. One afternoon, a young laborer named Alex pulled me aside. "Boss, I've been thinking about coming out to my family. Seeing how you did it gave me courage." His words hit me harder than any promotion ever could. In that moment, I understood the ripple effect my choice had created. I wasn't just living my truth, I was making space for others to do the same. Elias and I celebrated our anniversary that month with a quiet dinner at the same Italian restaurant where we had our first real date. Over pasta and wine, he raised his glass. "To the man who finally let the world see him." I clinked my glass against his, the simple act feeling profound. Later that night, as we lay in bed listening to the city hum below, he traced the band on my finger and said, "I'm proud of you, Em. Every day." The words wrapped around me like the warmest blanket. The journey that had started with a single confession had led us here, through family storms, workplace battles, and internal wars. Each step had stripped away the armor I had worn for so long, revealing the man I was always meant to be. But growth is never linear. A new challenge arrived when the company offered me the district supervisor role, the very promotion I had been eyeing for years. The catch was it required relocating to the suburbs 2 hours away. Accepting would mean more money, more stability, but it would also mean leaving the crew that had stood by me and the city life Elias and I loved. We talked late into the night, weighing the options. Elias was willing to move, but I saw the hesitation in his eyes. The studio he had built here, the friends we had made. I won't ask you to give up everything, I told him. The decision tore at me because success had always meant climbing higher, yet now success looked different. It looked like the life we had fought to build right here. In the end, I turned down the promotion, choosing instead to stay with the team that had become family, and the man who had taught me that love wasn't a sacrifice, it was a foundation. The choice felt right, and when I told the crew the next morning, their cheers echoed across the site louder than any crane engine. Mike slapped my back. "Knew you'd do the right thing, boss." In that moment, choking back the same tears I had felt the day I confessed, I realized the real victory wasn't the title, it was the man I had become. The decision to stay brought a new sense of peace, but life never stays still for long. Elias started experiencing chest pains one afternoon at his studio. He brushed it off as stress, but I insisted on the doctor. The tests revealed a minor heart issue, nothing life-threatening, but enough to require medication and lifestyle changes. The news hit me like a dropped load of rebar. Suddenly the roles reversed. I was the one worrying about schedules, and he was the one needing rest. I adjusted my hours, coming home earlier, making sure he took his meds and ate properly. The crew noticed the change. Mike offered to cover some of my early meetings without being asked. Tommy brought in healthy snacks for the break room, joking, "Gotta keep the boss fueled, so he can take care of his guy." Their support was seamless and kind, reminding me again that family isn't always blood. One particularly tough week, Elias had a bad reaction to the new medication, leaving him weak and frustrated. I took the day off the first time in years, and we spent it on the couch watching old movies, his head on my shoulder. "I hate being the weak one," he muttered. I kissed his forehead. "You were strong for me when I needed it. Now it's my turn." That afternoon we talked about the future, the what-ifs we had avoided. He admitted the fear of slowing me down, I admitted the fear of losing him. The conversation was raw and honest, stripping away the last layers of pretense between us. By evening he was feeling better, and we ordered takeout, laughing about the absurdity of life throwing curveballs when we least expected them. The experience deepened our bond, turning the ordinary moments into something sacred. At the site, the project was entering its final phase, the topping out ceremony just weeks away. The crew worked with renewed energy, and I found myself mentoring more openly, sharing not just technical skills but lessons about resilience and integrity. Alex, the young laborer who had been inspired by my story, came out to his parents the weekend before. He told me over coffee, "They didn't love it, but they're trying. Thanks, boss." His gratitude was a mirror reflecting back everything I had gained. The misunderstandings that had once threatened to break me had instead forged stronger connections. Even Frank sent a short email apologizing for the complaint, saying the time away had given him perspective. I replied with a simple, "No hard feelings. Take care." Closure came in unexpected places. My father's health improved enough for him to visit the site one afternoon. He walked the floors slowly, hard hat perched on his graying head, and watched the crew in action. Later over lunch he looked at me and said, "You built something real here, son. Not just the building, the people." Elias joined us for dinner that night, and the four of us, my parents, Elias, and me, sat around the table like any other family. The conversation flowed, easy stories of old jobs mixed with plans for the future. My father even asked Elias about his latest design project, genuine interest in his voice. Watching them, I felt the last piece of the puzzle click into place. The boy who had hidden from his father had become the man who could stand beside his husband without shame. As the weeks passed, Elias's health stabilized and our life settled into a new normal. I started volunteering with the same housing charity where we had met, teaching young tradespeople about safety and teamwork. Elias designed the program materials, and together we created something that mattered. The work filled me with purpose beyond the daily grind. One evening after a long day, I found Elias waiting with a small wrapped box. Inside was a new keychain engraved with our initials and the date of my confession. "For the man who chose us," he said softly. I pulled him into my arms, the city lights shining through the window, and in that embrace I felt the full weight of the journey lift. Every conflict, every sacrifice, every moment of doubt had led to this quiet, profound happiness. The crew, the family, the man beside me, they had all played their part in turning fear into strength. The topping out ceremony arrived on a perfect autumn day, the steel frame of the high-rise gleaming under a clear blue sky. The entire crew gathered on the top floor, hard hats on smiles wide. Mike handed me the ceremonial last beam, and as I signed it I felt the eyes of every man who had stood by me. Elias was there in the crowd looking up with pride. When the beam was set, the cheers erupted, and for a moment the city below seemed to pause. I stepped to the edge, looking out over the skyline, the buildings we had raised together, and realized this moment wasn't just about concrete and steel, it was about the lives we had changed along the way. Later at the celebration in a nearby hall, the crew presented me with a plaque engraved, "To the best boss and the bravest man we know." The words choked me up again, but this time the tears were pure joy. Speeches followed, Mike talking about leadership, Tommy sharing how my honesty had inspired him. Even Alex stood up thanking me publicly. Elias watched from the side, his hand finding mine under the table. The night ended with laughter and stories, the kind that bind people for life. Driving home, Elias rested his head on my shoulder and said, "You did it, Em. You built more than a building." I smiled because he was right. The journey that began with 2 terrifying words had transformed me, transformed us, and transformed the world around me in small but lasting ways. Months later, life continued its steady pace. The new project broke ground, Elias's studio thrived, and my parents visited often. The crew remained my second family, gathering for barbecues and holidays. I still worked long hours, but now I came home knowing exactly who I was and who I was coming home to. The internal storms had quieted, replaced by a deep calm I had never known. Looking back, I saw every misunderstanding, every sacrifice, every awakening as necessary steps on the path to this peace. Love hadn't been easy, but it had been worth every risk. True or false? Coming out to those who matter most is always the right choice, no matter the risks involved.